Hi everyone, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, great. Okay, so hi, thank you for the introduction, Amber. I'm Brittany Moser. I am the Director of Digital Learning Design. I'm on the digital learning team. And the last presentation that we did was based on creating a sense of belonging, as Amber had said, but we had a lot of questions about how do I create a sense of belonging for my neurodiverse students? And so I thought that that would be a great thing for us to hone in on today, particularly because any of the strategies that we share today are effective strategies for anyone, but they're particularly helpful for our neurodiverse population. So let's dive in. Okay, so the goal for this session is just to leave with one actionable thing that you can do to begin making your neurodiverse students feel like that sense of belonging. We know that from our last session that when our students feel like they belong in their space, they overall do better, right? We have a little recap here. And so we want to be making sure that we're targeting those students too. But the thing is that there are different strategies that are out there that can support that population that go beyond the original strategies that we discussed. And they're not difficult. They're really simple strategies. So what is neurodiversity? Let's just start there. Neurodiversity is the concept of recognizing and embracing the natural variation in neurological traits. I have to slow down for that one. Big fancy words for basically just understanding that there are different brains out there and that that is a good thing. So let's just go straight to strategy. So we know that there's all different kinds of brains. Everybody's brains operate differently. The way that I like to break this down is there are supportive environment strategies that we can employ, and then there's actually providing cognitive support for your students. And I'm going to share some of both. So environmental supports that we can employ for our online classrooms. Strategy number one, this one is so easy to do, and I highly recommend doing this at the start of every single term, is explicitly stating to your students that you embrace and support neurodiversity. You can send this out in your announcements, your welcome email, whatever that is. It is so beautiful for people to be explicitly saying those things because it's so powerful to set those norms right at the top of your learning sessions, right? You're communicating your expectations of the group around respect, that everybody here is welcome, that I know everybody operates differently and I welcome you. It's also just inviting those students to feel open and comfortable in your space. And it's hard to remember if you're not a neurodiverse person that those people might not feel welcome or like this is a space for them everywhere that they go. So you're ensuring that this is a place for you. And the last one is connects back to that belonging conversation we had a few months ago is it boosts that human connection piece because you're actually communicating some of your values to those people or to your whole group really. So that's why that's a super helpful strategy that's so easy to do, which is just explicitly stating that you are an open and safe space for this group of people. Strategy number two is promoting self-advocacy and accommodations. This is another super simple thing that you can employ in your announcements or in your emails, which is just putting it out there like, hey, let me know what you need. Hey, let me know that if you're struggling, because the university life is supposed to be a safe environment where we develop skills. We shouldn't have mastered skills already. And it would be different if they were out in the workplace, you know, they could lose their job, but you're teaching them how to build those skills so that when they get to the workplace, they know how to advocate for themselves and get what they need in order to be successful. So it's a really great thing to be promoting that skill development and guiding them through that process. And also, you're going to increase the likelihood of any of your students reaching out for support if you're throwing that out there, not just your neurodiverse students. Strategy number three is be really open to individualized accommodations. These can be extending deadlines for students, alternative assessment methods, assistive technology support. But I think a key thing with this one is that students need to be reminded that they have to reach out for help and or accommodations before it's too late. I think a key issue with this strategy is that you can sit there as the instructor and go, yeah, well, of course I'll provide the accommodations if they need them, but I didn't know because they've reached out the day before the assignment was due, or things like that. So I think it's at the top, encouraging students to be a self-advocate for whatever you need, but I don't know what you need unless you tell me. And that's super helpful because you're also showing them that there's different ways that we can all reach that same learning goal, right? Just because you submitted the assignment 5 days after this person submitted the assignment because that was an accommodation that you required, you still achieved the learning and they still achieved the learning, but everybody got what they needed and it was equitable. Okay, so this one is probably more of my favorite. I think it's a little bit more interesting, and that is switching gears to the cognitive supports. And if you don't know already, some of my background, or most of my background, is working with the population of people on the autism spectrum. And so I have a lot of experience working with very neurodivergent people. And I love understanding how the brain works and how there are very specific things that we can do to set up to just fill in gaps of the things that people struggle with in their brain. So if we can set up supports for their actual cognition, the cognitive support, we are genuinely setting these students up for success, not just feeling like they belong, but they do belong because they can participate effectively in the material. So number one is a structured course layout. I think we actually do a pretty good job at Park with this part. So organizing our materials really clearly, well-defined modules, we use headings, pathways, all of that kind of thing. I do think we do a good job at that. But I do think it's when you're putting together learning materials, like lecture material, for example, this is important to understand the why this is so important to structure things in a very organized way. And that is because many neurodivergent people actually have a hard time connecting the smaller pieces of learning to that bigger overarching learning goal. So connecting piece in module 1, how is that actually connecting to module 3 or module 5? We know because we built the courses, or because we've been doing this for a long time, that they all build upon each other to reach a final assessment or a midterm or whatever. But people, neurodivergent people, can struggle with this, and that's just part of the cognition. And then also can struggle, and I should emphasize can because it's not every single person, right? Everybody is different. These are just common trends. The mental and physical organization, it can be really hard for people to organize information in their brains and see how everything fits together and then digest the information and retain it. So if you're just providing a clear, structured, organized course where they can see what's going on, how things are connected, you're just opening the door for them. Next is incorporating visual supports such as diagrams, charts. All of this enhances the comprehension, right? This is just a helpful piece to retain information. And the reason why that is important is because many people struggle with visualization, and that's where visual supports really fill in that gap. Similarly, the future picture, many people struggle with being able to actually imagine what the final product looks like. And that can be a hard thing for people to imagine. So I like to think of as providing student examples, for example. So if you want your piece of assessment to be formatted like this, and you're just saying the words in the module, it can be really hard for students to be able to see in their brain, not only what that looks like at the end, but the steps that I need to do to get there. So if you can be providing visual supports of what the future picture looks like, what the end product should be, you're really helping students get there. And then if you can help them with the steps to get there too, that would be even more ideal. Okay, time management tools. There's already a lot of things built into Canvas for supporting students and adults with time management. But if you know that you have students in your class who have advocated that this is something that they struggle with, maybe you could suggest some scheduling app suggestions, or set up some checklists as you're building your course, or set up a to-do list in your announcements one week, because many of our students do struggle with time management. That's a big deal. One of my closest friends, she was diagnosed with ADHD very late in life. And she said that she never realized how much she struggled with her time management. And as she reflected, she was like, oh, because I was a college athlete. And so I had my every single day, all day, every day was scheduled for me, right? I didn't have to do an ounce of thinking. And so everything, I was just booked and busy and just did whatever I had to do. And so many of our students go through something like that, right? Where like they're already told what to do, but then like in high school or in elementary school, and then they get to the college level, and all of a sudden there's stuff here, there, and everywhere, but it's not as organized or prescribed as it usually is. So if we can be setting up students with the tools to be able to set up their own schedule effectively, that can be really supportive. And this is our last one, which is the buzzword of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, but all that really means is having some flexible ways to show what you know. So flexibility in assignment formats and submission methods is a really amazing way to be creative in your course design and make learning a little bit more fun and engaging, I guess. But the best part about that is the purpose is that students can bring their own strengths to the table to show what they know. So they're more deeply invested into the assessment methods, because if their strength is creating videos, for example, rather than writing an essay, then they can be really creative and put all of their knowledge and work into creating a very engaging video for you to watch, rather than having to read. They really struggle with writing and putting that together, then that's a way that they can bring their strength to the table, and they're likely to enjoy that, be more invested, again, showing what they know by utilizing their strengths. I personally don't see a problem with, we just want people to gain the learning, right? So if they can show you what they know in a way that's different to somebody else, but it's the same learning goal, I don't see the problem with that. And so quick little recap. So we had the 3 environmental supports. One was just stating that you embrace neurodiversity, all different kinds of brains, promoting self-advocacy and being open to those accommodations for people. And then cognitive support, so structured course layout, visual supports, time management tools, flexible assignment options where possible. If you have feedback, if you see opportunity for this in your courses and you're not the course developer, if you're an instructor, please either reach out to me and I can connect you with the course developer, or reach out to them directly. We're always open to feedback, and we want our courses to be as accepting, inclusive, engaging, all of those words as possible. So that is my little micro learning session for today. I'm trying to click next on my slides, but it looks like it might be dead. But that's the end of my presentation. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope it was helpful, and I'm happy to share these slides with everybody for you to reference.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brittany. I love that you always bring things down to a very practical level that we can take and use in our classes immediately. So what I'd like to do is just open it up to a Q&A session now for folks. Any questions that you have for Brittany, or maybe you saw something that sparked an idea for you and might want to get a little bit more information about that, or ask for her advice related to any of these strategies that we can use and implement. So at this point, feel free to just unmute your line and ask a question, or you can also just type it in the chat, and then Jamie and I are happy to read that out loud as well. So we'll give you guys a few minutes to just kind of think through that, chew on any questions you have, but feel free to unmute your line and ask away, and we can tap into Brittany's expertise while she's with us today.
I also have open office hours. I want to do a quick plug for that on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. and Thursdays at noon. And of course, if those times don't work for you, just send me an email and we can chat.
I do have a quick question in terms of any wording or terminology that you would recommend adding to your syllabus or your course, or exactly where would you put that So I know one of the recommendations in terms of environmental was letting students know that you support all types of neurodiversity. What is the language you use to share that in your class? If you have any recommendations for that.
I've seen one really great example of this, not for neurodiversity, but it was like an African American literature class. And so there was a whole section in the course overview of acceptable language and just basically common respect for each other within the class, within the dialogue, within the discussions, everything that went on. And I thought that that was a brilliant place for it to live, which was in the course overview. And then she also had posted in her initial announcements with the welcome to the students. I feel like it can be as direct as anything with just, this is in this course, I, as the instructor or as the course developer, we appreciate and welcome all types of cognition, and we support neurodiversity here. I don't think it needs to be drawn out. I think it's just straight up, and I'm here for whatever you need. Please reach out if you need support.
I love that. Sorry, I'm typing this up as you're talking, Brittany. In this course, we appreciate and welcome all types of cognition and welcome neurodiversity here. I'm here for your support, so reach out if there's any accommodations that are needed or.
Yeah, and I'm sure disability services have more like formal policies with PARC of, I know there is policies around accessing your accommodations, but those things can also fall through the cracks because there's just so much happening at all times, and some people don't know if they're supposed to be advocating for themselves, or so I feel like it's just as a whole, it's good for people to learn the skill of self-advocacy, regardless of if you're neurodiverse or not. So yeah, I think that's just a great skill to be building anyway.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for the language. I'm literally going to go be adding that to my master shells this week.
Well, so you met today's goal, which is one actual takeaway.
Thank you, Brittany. I just want to have something to add as a parent of a son who is autistic. I find that terminology does change so often. Sometimes it's the person before the disability or the ownership of the need for accommodation before the person. I personally don't like the term neurodiverse, but that's just the mom in me. It's in more of a newer term. But one thing I found interesting, because I'm really well trained in UDL, I find that it's very interesting and something to be cognitive of when you're, running your classrooms, that less than 12% of students with the need for accommodations coming from high school actually get those accommodations or ask for them or transition them into college. So many of our students have a need for special accommodations, but do not voice it for themselves when they go to college. And so I think that's why personally I feel the need, how important UDL is. I'm actually going to be doing my dissertation on this, but the importance of it and training all instructors on just something just as little as highlighting something in an announcement in like a darker red that is not accessible for visually impaired students, or making sure that when you do an announcement, writing in 14-point font, not 12. That's, that's for like Microsoft Word. That 14-point is the more accessible accommodation. So thank you so much. I loved your presentation. I think you're amazing, and I can't wait to pop in an office visit and chat with you.
Yes, please do. And thank you for sharing that, particularly about UDL. I think that it's often used as an auxiliary strategy, but really it should be woven within all classrooms everywhere. It's just good teaching practice. And it's the same in Australia too, just traditional teaching structures of classrooms. But if you look at countries like Finland and the Netherlands, and a lot of their classrooms are structured to be a lot more strengths-based and a lot more flexible, I think we could learn a lot from that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Amanda. And also just based on your own experience, but even again, those practical, I'm taking notes as you guys are both talking about the 14-point font and just how to structure our courses and just think about how we present this information in a different way. And that, like you mentioned, there to promote that self-advocacy, that number is really disturbing, Amanda, to hear that it's only, did you say 12%?
You know,
Folks who actually bring their
Yeah.
accommodation. Yeah. So
Very
then
low.
that's also a way that we can really try to create an environment that is welcoming to encourage students to share that with us. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Sorry, go ahead. I think I interrupted you. Go ahead, Amanda.
Oh no, I was just saying it was very low because I do a lot of these workshops that I love sitting in and listening and learning. And that was really shocking to me, the low percent of students that when they transition to college, don't actually transition those accommodations.
I had one kind of suggestion or thought that has actually been helpful for me to kind of get to that point of like getting the students to tell you what they need. And I got this from somebody else. It was not my idea, but like one of the first assignments I give, I think it's always usually within the first week or for sure by the second week. Second week and 16-week, first week for 8-week, is I ask them the question, and it's required, they have to turn it in for points, is how is it that I can best support you as an instructor? And it's amazing of what comes up in that, because they may tell you something personally. They may tell you that they struggle with time management. They may tell you about their job situation, but that has been really helpful to me to kind of get around in case somebody's not using disability services in regards to it. And the other point that I've always kind of tied to is that if you offer something for someone that has a disability, then I generally will open it to everybody and make it inclusive to everybody, because generally it's usually going to be helpful to, as Brittany mentioned in her presentation, it helps everyone usually. So that has been kind of my mindset whenever I offer something, but really encourage you guys to just be really, just ask the question straight up instead of us reading their minds. Just ask them straight up, what it is that you need from me as an instructor the next 8 weeks. And that's been really helpful to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. That's spot on.
I've never had the pleasure of teaching online, just on site. But I hear from the online students here all the time. One area we can probably do better at is when it comes to quizzes, the timed quizzes, or the number of times they can attempt a quiz. That becomes a barrier, and they start shutting down, and we don't want that, you know. So on site, what I've really enjoyed seeing, and this is a plug to Danielle, I use the VARC survey quite a bit in the classroom, mostly because most of our military students come in and say, I'm a visual learner, or I'm a hands-on learner, and what I've seen over time is we're very good at labeling people, but we're even better at accepting labels without questioning them. I'm not a big fan of just accepting labels. There's ways, you know, Helen Keller is a great example from history, but it's too easy for students just to say, well, this is the best it's going to get, and never get past it. So those are my comments.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think that's where the cognitive supports come in, right? Is like there are actually things that we can put in place that are going to make you successful, or that can really help you with the learning. Not even, I mean, obviously product output, you know, they have to produce something to show that the learning occurred, but I think the focus is also on the journey too. And so I think the more of those supports that, like, I'm just thinking of what you said, and like, can we provide some templates for essay writing or something? I know there's a ton of resources in the library, but I hear exactly what you're saying, and it's just, there's so many things that we can do to support people. Thanks for sharing.
I'll share another story. My son was a Park student and he came to me and said, Dad, I don't want to do online. And I said, well, you're going to have to. So what I did is I put him in a class that I knew would be, he was going to need elective credits. I put him in Geo 300 dinosaurs. He had a great time in that class. It got him over the fear of online learning and he just flourished in all his other online classes. So the fear of the unknown is a terrible barrier for our students.
Yeah. And also that was very smart of you to do that, because I think we all operate with anything that we feel worried or anxious about. If someone can set it up for us where we can experience a bit of success early on, we're so much more likely to persist with it because we've had those endorphins and that confidence boost. So that's even something for us to consider with our course design, is like the assignments or the quizzes that we have early on, can we set them up so they're a little bit easier so that students feel that success? And to your point around the quiz times, I'm all for open-ended, because I mean, that's what the accommodations kids have in schools for state testing. If you have a disability, you can usually get some sort of testing accommodation to have time and a half or double time.
Ended up moving any quizzes that I had to be mastery assignments where they could take it as many times as they would like. There would be different questions each time, but I mean, it's really about mastering the material, and then it just takes the highest grade versus, you know, a high stakes one-time test and that's it, or a high stakes one-time quiz or whatever. But I think too, you know, as you were talking, Matt, it made me think about just also acknowledging our own bias in all of this is, you know, I'm a very visual learner. And so I create a lot of visual assignments for my students. But even as Brittany's talking and some other sessions I've attended of hers and some others, you know, it has me rethinking all of my activities in different ways that I want to create multiple pathways or options for them to choose. So you can do, you know, even if it's something as basic as like an introductory assignment, you can do a video or an audio or a graphic representation or a written, you know. And so I think even just giving more options for learners also allows to kind of speak back to that more universal design of instruction that you were talking about as well, Brittany. And I think, you know, coming at it as a course developer from that angle, if we can all think through that lens a little bit more, I think it'll all be helpful to our students. I know I need to do that myself for sure.
The thing with that is like your rubrics don't change, you know,
Right.
like it's just the way that they're submitting. But the rubric, if you're structuring it correctly, your rubric doesn't change. The way that you're able to identify if they retain the information and they understand what's going on, that shouldn't be.
My experience with that VARC survey, it allowed me to create different activities. So I could do digital activities, I could do paper activities, I could do hands-on activities within the course of the evening. It number one, saved me from lecturing for 3 hours, and it reinforced that, look, you may have hands-on as your primary learning style, but it's not like an 80% hands-on. What it showed the students is they're more situational learners and very adaptable. And because they'd never seen anything like this before, they just assumed that this is my only learning style, and that's the only way I can operate. Is it adaptable to an online environment? I think it is. So.
I wanted to jump in really quickly here. I love this conversation, by the way. I also think that it's really important, primarily because so much of the conversation over the last few years has seemed to kind of not really emphasize as much neurodiversity when we're talking about inclusivity and belonging. And I think that's because there are already government policies and regulations in place that kind of cover it. And this conversation has me thinking about going from just compliance to really opening up this to where it's going to benefit students beyond just, are we doing what we should be doing, to really making sure that we're doing what the students need. And I think it's completely different. And so thank you so much, Brittany. And I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation. But as we're talking, one of the first things I start thinking about is like, how do we scale this? How do we make it? Because like, I know that in my classroom, right, I'm checking in with students. I am asking, what do you need? I've done an exercise for a few semesters there, similar to what Brant was talking about, where I give them out index cards and I'm like, they have to turn this in. It actually counts for a couple points, where I ask questions like, what do you think might be the biggest barrier to you being successful in this class? And what do you need from me this semester? What are you excited about for this course? So it's like really simple questions, but it might give me some insight as to, beyond just things related to neurodiversity, but also like I found out that there was one student that was a full-time real estate agent, and there are students that are working 60-hour-a-week jobs, and I'm like, how are you doing this, right? And so that aside, thinking about how to scale this, I'm like, we have the Canvas classrooms. Could we do things like including a screener question that would do something like, do you need access to accommodations through parks, students, disability services, or if we're going to frame it differently, that would automatically shoot an email out to the instructor for the course as well as that office. That would just kind of let us know, okay, this student might need time and a half on these quizzes, right? Or is it something as simple as, a highlighted question that is on the top of the first 2 weeks of quizzes or graded assignment that says, if you need additional time or accommodations for assignments, please don't forget to click here, or please don't forget to click here to reach your instructor. Because I think being able to remind students to advocate for themselves is so important, but also I know that if you are a part of a group and you feel somewhat marginalized already, it is somewhat so difficult to then do the work of advocating for yourself. And
I completely agree with that.
If we can lighten that burden at all by just making it that much simpler, and prompting students to say, hey, this is a priority for us too, and we want to make this available. We have a training course for adjuncts, the PDL. I don't know if we're still calling it that. It's been a while since I've taken it, but if you're going to teach online, you must take this course. So even including something in that course that says, we're going to include this information to tell you how to help students who might need accommodations in courses. But that's my wheels turning and thinking about, how do we scale this? How do we make it beyond one-on-one, which is really important, but also helps with the reach so that we're helping more students. But thank you so much for being here, Brittany, and for getting us started on this.
Yeah, I love everything and agree with everything that you said. I feel like, yes, exactly. The burden can't just be on them. We have to show that, like, meet halfway as an organization too. They've got to advocate for themselves every day of their life. So if we can meet them some way and show that we care as well, I think that's really important. And then to what you said about compliance really struck with me, just because, like, if I think about a traditional classroom, any person can go in and teach the curriculum, but a good teacher comes in and makes it engaging and has relationships with the students and sets up activities and reaches people. It's not just about teaching the curriculum. So it is about going that extra step of creating that learning environment. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Tony, I also love your idea of making it easy for them, where it is literally a button you click versus, okay, am I going to have to send some awkward email to my instructor directly? Like, how is this? So I love that idea of even just putting it into a form in our online classes, or like you mentioned, we could at least at the very minimum put this into the course development training, you know, that faculty members go through. I mean, this whole discussion, I've been taking notes of like, okay, we need to make sure all of this gets added to that module, as well as I want to make these changes to my own course. But I love that idea of like even maybe kind of a combination of what Brant and Matt and Tony and Brittany have all been talking about, of like a welcome form of, you know, I'm your instructor, I care about you, I want to help you be successful, help me understand what your needs are, asking that question that Brant had about how can I best support you as an instructor. And then also, if you have any accommodations that are needed through Parks support offices, click here, you know, and then it would automatically direct them to that email or whatever that could be. You know,
Yeah.
I think that would be a way to really kind of streamline a lot of this to make it easy for the student. And that's really what we want to do, right? So I love all of these ideas. Thank you guys for sharing.
Just to add to that, Amber, I think, so I knew that not enough of our students were reporting when they needed help or needed disability services or accommodations, but that 12% number is really scary to me. And so if any of these steps can help to improve that, and automation, I think, is the best way to do it. So even if this is a co-creation with our instructional design team or talking with disability services and figuring out how all of these offices can work best together to help these students, I think is where we're gonna be able to get the best outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, our team is certainly always happy to pilot things and try it out and revise, get feedback. So anyone wants to work on it with us, we'd be more than happy to partner.
I see a little cross-departmental collaboration and powwow in our future.
Wow.
All right. Any other last final comments, thoughts? I know we're coming up at our time. We've got about 3 minutes left. Any
Brittany, I just
last?
had
Yeah, please go ahead, Brant.
No, I just had a question, and I don't know if this is something maybe to be added to the maintenance of wherever you send out stuff for maintenance. But one of the things is that I really echo and I have learned, and and then I go back and look at frustrated that I forget. But like putting a sample of what you exactly want in an assignment within the assignment. So like you attach a sample in regards to it, because we all like get frustrated whenever we don't get what we want, but then we go back and look at what we tried to explain to them. So I don't know if there's some way to add within the maintenance of like even suggestions of like, okay, this is how you can go back and add to your course shell or CD
Yeah.
shell, because that's something that I'm planning to do for 203 that
Mhm.
I just like a course I just did is I'm now teaching it, which is one thing I highly recommend after you've like developed it, is to teach it, and then you see all the flaws that you have. But like going back and then going, okay, that's one thing I'm going to do in my maintenance is I'm going to add all these different examples or samples of exactly what I want. It's one of my to-do lists, but that's something that was a suggestion that maybe you can share with, you know, in your all's team, is like, is there some way that you can put that within to suggest or like
Yes.
add to make, especially to maintenance, because people may not think about it originally. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be seemed like a great idea. And we've got 2 of our instructional designers on the call, so hope they're taking notes.
and I'm just speaking from experience. I just came out of the advanced WAC workshop that Amy did. And if it hadn't been for some of the examples that she shared or some of those things, I wouldn't have an understanding or an idea, or where she took us to a site that like gave you an example. And that was just extremely helpful. So I'm speaking more as a student right now too. So.
I love that idea, Brant, because that way we're talking about making it easier for the learners, but also making it easier for the course developers. Because like you said, you know, I have a running document, like a Word doc or something of notes of maintenance, but to be able to have like an example directly in there, I think would be you'd have a lot more faculty developers adopting that immediately, you know, as kind of a present reminder of, oh yeah, that was something I wanted to integrate. And here's a really easy example I could cut and paste and customize to make it my own. So yeah, I think that would be great for helping faculty too. Well, I hate to cut off a good thing and a good conversation that we've got going, but I do want to be respectful of your time, which I know we are at the end of for today's session for our Lunch and Learn. A huge thanks to all of you for spending your lunch with us today on this Friday. A huge thanks to Brittany Moser for being willing to share your expertise with us, as well as the amazing instructional design team that Brittany works with. So, and Brittany, would you mind reminding us just really quickly about those office hours you have, just in case folks want to pick your brain further?
Yes, of course. Tuesdays 9 a.m. and Thursdays 12 noon. The link is in our newsletter that we send out. I think it just went out a couple days ago. But if you miss it or you just want to chat, just send me an email and I'm happy to link up.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining, and I hope you have just an absolutely lovely weekend, and we will see you at the next FCI Lunch and Learn, which I think is next week on April 3rd. We're talking to a panel of international students from a variety of different countries on how to connect, teach, again, part of that creating that belonging, but also just excellent teaching and learning when it comes to teaching and learning international students. We heard from experts outside the institution in January about how to teach international students, but next week we're going to hear directly from the students. So we're looking forward to that panel discussion, April 3rd for another Lunch and Learn. Hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much.
Thanks
Have a good
everyone.
weekend. Bye-bye.